Think about the most successful person you know. Think about them in your mind. Now think about maybe the company that they work at or the number of social media followers that they have. Chances are, when you thought about the most successful person that you know, you probably thought of someone who either has a lot of money, has a million followers on Instagram or TikTok or some social media platform, or has built a really successful business for themselves. Now, throughout history, when we look at all of the greats of business, sports, entertainment, what have you, a lot of us will look back in awe and think to ourselves, that could never be me. But today, Daniel and I want to record this episode because we want to share with you our thoughts on this idea that everything great all started from zero at one point. Doesn't matter if it was Steve Jobs, John D. Rockefeller, Kim Kardashian, Tom Brady. All of these people at one point started as a complete beginner, as someone with zero skills, zero ability, and maybe even zero money to get to the point where they are today, where they're admired or seen as successful, at least in a traditional sense, by millions of people. And in that same way, we've also seen through our own personal experience, growing our own followings on LinkedIn from 0 to over 10,000 followers, and me personally on YouTube from 0 to 180,000 subscribers, that all great achievements require a core set of things from the person that is working on that goal. And so we're going to bucket this conversation into 3 categories. The first is we're going to talk about internal challenges that you must face, that anyone must face and overcome in order to go from 0 to 1. Second is we're going to talk about external factors and challenges that many of us inevitably will run into as we're on this journey of going from a complete beginner to an expert. And then finally, we're going to close out by also talking about a third bucket, which is the fundamental work ethic that's required and how you can also get into the right mindset so that you can put in the work that's required to achieve that success. Daniel, do you want to kick us off with that first bucket?
Let's do it, Matt. So this first bucket here is the internal pressure. And that's that voice in your head and the fear that you may not even be able to tangibly know that you're going through this. That fear of failure, that you think that you can't do it, or you think as soon as you post something, it's going to flop and you won't be a success and you're just not capable of doing anything. But we want to prove this wrong to you in 2 ways. The first one is just the simple fact that everyone started from 0. Tom Brady wasn't just born the best football player of all time. He worked for it. When you think about Mr. Beast and everyone else on social media for that matter, they started at 0 followers. They just posted a lot, they got better, they improved, they iterated, but they started at 0. That's what everyone shares, regardless of if you have 1,000 followers on LinkedIn and Instagram or 100 million. But the other part is a story that I want you to tell, Matt, about when you were in investment banking and after you got the job as a summer intern to be a banker in New York.
Yeah, so the story that Daniel's referring to is after I'd landed a investment banking internship, I went back to campus that fall and I knew that I had this fancy job lined up. And I was at a party trying to impress a girl, and I told her when she asked me what I do or what I was studying, what I was pursuing, that, oh yeah, I'm going to be an investment banker in New York next summer. And I thought that I was going to feel a lot better after I said that. But what I realized very quickly was that while in the moment, when the words came off my mouth, it felt good, that feeling of satisfaction, joy, whatever you want to call it, disappeared very quickly, just as fast as it had appeared. And what I realized in that moment was that similar to success, where the actual feeling of achieving a goal that you've wanted for such a long time, maybe it's months, maybe it's years, you've worked towards this thing, you put in blood, sweat, and tears into this. Anyone who has succeeded at something will know what I'm talking about. The moment feels really good, but very quickly it fades, and you realize that, oh, maybe that wasn't the thing that I was actually looking for in the whole time. Because now I have to move the goalposts, and now I need to think about the next goal that I'm going to go after. And there's this giant treadmill happening where you keep moving the goalposts every time you achieve a goal. And over time, if you do this enough, and if you reflect on it, you come to realize that the successes themselves don't actually bring you that much satisfaction. And in the same way, when we think about the failures, yes, it really hurts in that moment. And yes, I do think that you should feel those emotions and you should acknowledge that, okay, maybe I fell short in this moment, or maybe I didn't do as much as I could have. But you don't let that define you, and you recognize that it's just a feeling and shit happens and you just move on. So if you can come to that mental unlock and realize that failure is just a stepping stone, it's a part of the process, it's a natural evolution towards success. If you think about your life as a series of steps that are moving up a staircase, you're basically, every 5 steps, you're probably going to fail. But then every sixth step, maybe you make a breakthrough. Maybe you achieve a goal. It moves you a little bit closer to that end state. But then after that, you have another 5 steps of failing, falling on your face, you know, just eating glass before the next one. And in the beginning stages, very early on, when I was very young, I used to get very upset when I would run into these failures, and it became something that I wanted to avoid at all costs. I wanted to avoid this feeling of, oh, I just posted a YouTube video and it's a 10 out of 10, which for the audience, when you're a creator, YouTube essentially tells you how bad or how good your video is performing compared to the last 10. So if you get a 10 out of 10, it's actually not a good thing. It means it's the worst performing video out of your last 10. And every time I would get a 10 out of 10 or even a 7 or 8 out of 10, I would feel horrible. And I think to myself, I should just quit and sell my camera because this ain't worth it. But the mental unlock for me was realizing that not every video can be a 1 out of 10. Not every video can be the best out of the last 10. Yes, I would love to have every video be the best. If I knew how to do that, though, I'd be a billionaire. Instead, the content game is really just about recognizing that for every 10 videos that you post or every 10 LinkedIn posts that you make, maybe only 2 or 3 out of them are going to break 100,000 impressions if it's on LinkedIn, or maybe only 1 or 2 is going to be your best performer. Statistically, it's a power law. But to bring it all together, Daniel, that moment when I told the girl at school that I was working in investment banking, and I realized very quickly that the feeling of accomplishment did not last. It also reminded me that the feeling of failure doesn't last, and that the people that can pick themselves up quicker and keep moving forward the next day like nothing's happened, those are the ones that actually eventually go from 0 to 1 and build something really, really big that one day people look at them and say, oh, he or she just got lucky. That's my rant.
Matt, that is one of my favorite stories that you've told on the pod, just because a lot of people put something so high up in their head, like this investment banking job, thinking their life is going to change after they get it. And I know this because I've done this with stuff in my life. I felt that after I got a 35 on the ACT, my life would change. I went to school the next day, nothing changed. And we do this with these next steps, but then it's like after the ACT, it's getting into college. And then after college, it's getting the job. And we keep on doing this. And then it's like, it's all for what? It's not like your life instantly changes after you accomplish this thing. And I love the way you framed it on how just like when you get that one thing you've been hoping for, your life won't change. The same thing with failure. It's going to not change just as much. One more thing I want to touch on in this category of mental blocks we just put in our head is imposter syndrome. And the whole concept of everyone starting from zero means everyone really is the same at zero. So if you think about Tom Brady, anyone else in business that you look up to, whether it's Mr. Beast or anyone on social media, they're all humans at the end of the day. It's not like if you have 400 million followers or whatever Mr. Beast has, it's not like he doesn't eat. It's not like he doesn't sleep. We're all still human. So knowing that too should motivate you to take that next step because you are capable just like everyone else because you're going to start where everyone else started from.
100% Daniel. And imposter syndrome is definitely something that I've also dealt with and continue to deal with. And I think part of it is a good thing. I do think some amount of imposter syndrome is actually healthy because it means that you recognize what you're not yet capable of. But when it comes to growing as a person and as a professional, and if there's a goal that you want to achieve, oftentimes that means you need to become this version of yourself that is capable of achieving that goal. So, for example, something that I told myself in the early days of running my YouTube channel, and I have this literally written in a notebook somewhere behind me. I've been journaling for years, and one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever received, which applies to literally anything that you have a goal in, is you need to almost extrapolate out like 6 to 12 months or whatever timeline into the future, and you need to think, what would this version of me who has 100,000 subscribers, in my case, that was the goal. What does a 100,000 subscriber YouTuber act like? What do they think like? How do they think about content? What degree of care do they put into their scripting, their ideation? What are all of the things that someone who today has a 100,000 subscriber YouTube channel, what do they do? And then how can I try to put myself into that position and act like I'm already that type of person who would get 100,000 subscribers? Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, but that's like, yeah, you're just faking it. You're a fraud. Like, you're not actually there yet. Yeah, but at the same time, that is one of the most effective techniques to actually moving you towards that direction of the person that you need to become. Because today, you're just not that person. So you don't deserve that goal. And so obviously, the external reality doesn't reflect that. Like, Daniel, you and I want to build a $10 million podcast. Today, we're probably not the people that could be running a $10 million podcast. Like, yes, we have the potential to, but we are not yet those $10 million podcasters. Because if you think about what a $10 million podcaster does, there's probably a lot of things that they do that you and I are not yet at that level. And that's okay. But recognize that everyone started at that point. Chris Williamson has posted over 1,000 podcasts. We've done probably 30 to 40. Dude, then obviously we don't deserve to have like 5 million subs like he does. So when you recognize that, it actually makes you feel a little bit better because it's not that you don't deserve that. It's just you're not that person yet. And you're on the journey of becoming the person that does eventually deserve and is capable of achieving that goal. So for me, that was the big unlock. And recognizing that the imposter syndrome was also just a completely normal part of the process. And it means that I'm human and it means that I recognize what I'm not yet capable of was really important. But at the same time, not letting that cripple me and make me not take the action that's required to become that version of me that could have 100,000 subscribers. That was the main key.
This is a great way to transition into the next category, which is more mental barriers, but mental barriers you're going to face from the outside. The first category is mental barriers you're facing from yourself, like those fear of failures, the things that you're telling yourself. But the next category is things that other people are going to tell you that are going to affect you mentally. Think like your social circle. You're going to be made fun of the first time you post on social media consistently. We know this because Matt and I both have. I mean, when I was posting for viral EDs in high school, I was constantly made fun of for being on TikTok in 2020 and posting cringe videos. And some of that was deserved, to be honest. But changing your really identity in a way, changing what you do because I'm no longer just the Daniel Greenberg that goes to school and plays tennis. I'm the Daniel Greenberg that is posting on TikTok, and changing your identity is incredibly difficult. And then even when you get to that TikToker status or whatever it is, there's so much pressure within that TikToker circle to be a TikToker. And then like, do you feel almost stuck in that. Like then you can't become a business person. So this next bucket is all about the mental barriers that you're facing from the external. Matt, do you want to tell a story in this bucket?
Very early on, when I had about 300 subscribers on my personal YouTube channel, I went to dinner with a friend. Great guy, but during that meal, I told him, "Dude, I've been posting on YouTube." And I pulled up my YouTube Analytics app and I showed him the subscriber count, and I thought he would find it really interesting. But the reaction that I got was one of disbelief. He said, "My gosh, like Matt, you of all people trying to be a YouTuber? Come on, man. You're the last person that I ever thought would be posting YouTube videos out on the internet." And I remember going home that night with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because I could tell that he just didn't have that same level of belief that I could do it. And I want to be very clear. Nobody owes you any form of conviction, any level of belief in the very beginning. If you have supporters when you're starting something from 0 and trying to go to 1, that is a plus. That is literally the whipped cream and the cherry on top. But I firmly believe to this day that nobody owes you any kind of support in the beginning except yourself. You should have the highest level of conviction in your idea, because if you don't have that self-belief, then no one else is going to. So they don't owe it to you to believe in your idea because there's just simply no proof. And what I find is, with the social circle pressure that we're talking about here and the doubters that you will inevitably run into, a lot of times the comments that you receive or the looks and the remarks and the conversations behind your back, they're really more a reflection of those people and not of you. Because when they see that you are doing something different or you're trying to make a change in your identity or who you are as a person, you're moving away from that version of you that they are familiar with. Say Daniel Greenberg from 2019. Like the Daniel Greenberg in 2025 and 2026 is totally different from the Daniel Greenberg in 2019. So that makes people uncomfortable because it instinctually or subconsciously makes them think, okay, wait, have I changed too? Like how far have I come since that time? And for most people, the answer is going to be not very far, or maybe not. They just haven't made as many drastic changes in their life as you. And that's not bad. I don't want to make it sound like we're anti people that just have a very stable life and haven't really changed or grown much in their career or in their life. But I think that it makes people a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, especially if they're coming from a place of insecurity about who they are as a person. And that is where the comments start, because they're saying things like, "Oh my gosh, look at that guy Daniel. Dude, he started posting on LinkedIn. Can you believe it?" Like, I remember when he was posting on TikTok and the videos were only getting a couple hundred views. Or I remember, look at this post he made. Ha ha ha. It only got like 3 likes. So cringe, man. But the thing is, when I went home that night after talking to my friend, and I could sense that he didn't believe in the thing that I was working on, it actually made me want to work a little bit harder because I wanted to prove him wrong that it was possible. And I want to be very clear. Still good friends with this guy. Nothing against him. He might even watch this video. I don't know. But a very valuable lesson that I learned that night was that nobody owes it to you to believe in you. And so when you do inevitably get people talking behind your back or saying things like, "I can't believe Daniel or Matt is trying to do like a podcast. Like, what the heck? There's so many other podcasts. Why on earth would they succeed?" Just see it as part of the process and recognize that nobody owes you anything. So just keep doing you.
You have to keep doing you, Matt, or else nothing will change. That's what all the successful people before us did. They had to change something. And part of this is, and I'm sure if the audience has done any change recently, whether it's lose some weight, go to the gym more, train for a half marathon, you also have to practice telling people that that's part of your identity. And it's tough trying to practice, like saying your new identity, like saying that I'm training for a half marathon. And some people are gonna make fun of you for it. And to me, when some of your friends are making fun of you for it, I think it proves that they're actual friends, because you don't want people who are just gonna say, "Oh, yeah," and just, like, be super nice about everything all the time. You wanna be able to have a good time and joke about it. But on the more serious side, you are gonna get hate comments, and that's gonna mess with your mind externally, like, Matt and I have gotten for practically years now. You can't act like you're never gonna get them or never gonna read them. That's just the price of success and entry, really. It's a fixed cost, because if you are successful, then you're gonna get hate comments, but if not, then someone might tell you, "Why are you doing nothing with your life?" So, I was like to think about it the same way when Matt just told the story about investment banking and then also failing, like, it just balances itself out. So, I really would encourage the audience when they inevitably get those hate comments to use the same framework as Matt just did with his investment banking, and understand that it's all part of the process and it doesn't really matter.
100% Daniel. And I think this is a great transition point into our third pillar, which is work ethic. And I know a lot of people watching this are thinking, dude, come on. Of course I know. I got to work hard. This isn't new to me. But I think we often need to be reminded more than we need to be taught that going from 0 to 1 and building something great that you can actually be proud of is actually more simple than we think. We like to overcomplicate this idea of success and this idea of what it takes, and that we've got to be doing these 20 different things absolutely correct in order for this to work out. Otherwise, it's all going to fall apart. But fundamentally, I think that being able to build something that you are proud of requires a few very key ingredients. Obviously, the idea of what you're going to work on has to be somewhat interesting and exciting to you, because there's no way you're going to be able to stick with it for a long time if it's not at least somewhat interesting or engaging to you. But two, you have to actually be able to follow through with the work that's required to take this thing out of your head, which a million people, and I have so many thoughts of this, Daniel. Ideas are cheap, execution is rare. You have to be able to go from idea to execution. And that is the hardest part that 99% of people stop and get stuck at. But Daniel, I'm curious for you, because you're an absolute workhorse when it comes to the content and just everything and running this podcast. How do you think about work ethic? What keeps you motivated? Why are you still working with me 3-4 months into this, even though we've gotten rejected by hundreds of guests at this point? What motivates you? What drives you?
The way most people think about work ethic is flawed. Here's the way people think about work. If I have a side hustle, I have to do my 9 to 5, and then I can do my side hustle after. That thinking needs to change. When everything can be on your phone, it doesn't matter if you're a barista or a consultant or a CEO running a company. You have to cut out the garbage time. Let's say you're walking to grab your lunch for 10 minutes or something, and normally you will just scroll TikTok as you walk. Respond to LinkedIn comments instead. Maybe you have a idea for a LinkedIn post at the desk. As opposed to just saying to yourself, "Oh yeah, I may remind that to myself later when I'm at my other desk writing LinkedIn posts." No, you have to write it down right then and there. When you are working, whether it's a 9 to 5 or a CEO or a barista, it's not like you're working on the clock and have to be locked in 24/7. There are periods of downtime. We all scroll. That's part of life. But you have to cut out as much of that scroll time as you can. And instead of that scroll time to give yourself a break, what about responding to LinkedIn comments? What about responding to emails for your side hustle? What about emailing podcast guests that you may want to have on the show, or responding to DMs on LinkedIn. There's so many things that you can do in that, downtime, because you're not really working 24/7. And I think that mindset shift will really unlock so many hours throughout the week for people in our audience. Because that, to me, Matt, is someone who does work a lot of hours per week and doesn't really think work should be measured in hours. It really should be measured more in output. But having that unlock of really cutting out the garbage time and replacing those breaks, which you do need breaks in your work, and breaking up work between responding to LinkedIn comments and then making a slideshow for two totally different things helps you be better at both of them. So, really changing your mindset shift around how you work and how you think about breaks is something that I think is really important and has unlocked a huge lever of productivity for me.
Just adding on there, Daniel, I think there are nuggets of a lot of nuggets of wisdom in there. I think the point that you're hitting on is that it's not just about hours. I think about work ethic and productivity more generally as like a function of the number of hours that you're working times the intensity at which you're working in those hours times like any kind of leverage that you have that increases your output. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say you're trying to come up with a whole month's worth of content. So we talked to someone on the podcast, Lee McCabe, who's the top voice in private equity on LinkedIn. He's got over 40, if not 50,000 followers by this point. Absolutely crushes it. He writes a single month's worth of LinkedIn content in a weekend. And to a normal person, they're probably thinking, that's insane. How on earth does he do this? But here's the thing. Let's say that one weekend, you've only got but yeah, let's give you Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so that's 48 hours. Now, you're not going to be awake for those 48 hours. So you probably only got, assuming you're sleeping 8 hours on the weekends, let's say you got like 16 hours per day. So that's roughly 30 plus hours. I mean, we're gonna go down, round down a little bit because you've got to eat, you got to go to the bathroom. So 20 to 30 hours to pump out, say, if you're doing 5 posts a week, that's 20 posts, 20 to 30 posts maybe for, 20 to 30 hours of work. So that's basically you having to produce 1 post every hour on average. So how on earth does he do this? Well, he's obviously working at a very high intensity. So he's probably maxing the number of hours, but I'll also caveat that the hours may not necessarily be the entire time, because if he's got leverage, say he's working with like an AI or he's got someone else who's writing with him, like these are great examples of leverage that can increase your output for the same amount of time. But lead works with a very high intensity. So when he's sitting down, he's not checking his phone. He doesn't have his notifications popping off. He's sitting down and doing deep work for a few hours where he's probably cranking out 5 to 10 ideas and then drafting them all up at the same time in his notes app, right? Now, Lee is able to do this because he, one, has a deep amount of expertise on the field that he's talking about, and two, he really understands what private equity guys want to hear, see, or read on social media. So he has no issue with producing the content. It's purely a function of him being able to put the stuff in his brain into bite-sized chunks of content that will work on LinkedIn. But he's working at a high intensity. He's probably also putting in the hours. Now, he writes all of his content himself. So when we think about the different types of leverage, there is technology. So like software that could probably increase your output per unit of time worked. There's obviously people. So like if he had a team of ghostwriters that were helping him to produce content, then yeah, he could probably do it all in a very short amount of time. There's other forms of leverage too that we can talk about, like capital and whatnot. But media is also, this is getting so off topic, but like social media is also a form of leverage because it's so scalable. But getting so off topic here. Essentially, what I'm trying to get at, Daniel, is that work ethic is not just the number of hours that you work. So when people say, oh, I worked 80 hours a week, or oh, I worked 100-hour a week, that actually doesn't mean much, because what was the actual output that came out of that 80-hour work week? It could have been the same as someone who worked 40 hours but had a much higher efficiency, or who had more leverage, or worked at a much higher intensity. And I think for you, Daniel, you work at a really high intensity. So even though maybe you have like a very busy day job, you're still able to get a lot done for the podcast and for, your other businesses outside of your day job because you work at such a high intensity. So something that I've also been thinking about, Daniel, is how work ethic, there's lazy work ethic and then there's like hardworking, not lazy work ethic. Now, what I mean by that is lazy work ethic is like, yeah, I'm just gonna put in the sheer number of hours and I'm gonna work an 80-hour week and then be like, all right, there's nothing I could have done more. But it's lazy because you're not thinking about how can I maximize my output for every working hour versus someone who is being really thoughtful about, okay, what can I do during this work session that I have where maybe I only have a few hours, but what can I do to maximize the output that I'm getting for every input, which is time and energy? So nowadays, there are a lot of tools available to us and a lot of things that can increase the output for every unit of input. Naval Ravikant, who's a venture capitalist, has this famous, and I don't actually know if this is from him, but he's famous for talking about the four forms of leverage that exist in the world. The oldest forms of leverage are people and capital. So if you think about like the kings and rulers of ancient history, the reason why they were so powerful was because they had hundreds of thousands of people that if they said one word, like all of those people would mobilize and towards that one goal. So that's a huge form of leverage because instead of one guy trying to build the Great Pyramids of Egypt, now you've got like 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 people that are all trying to build the Great Pyramids, right? So if one guy had tried to do that himself, I mean, I don't think he would have been able to do it, but like theoretically, it would have taken him like thousands of years. But when now you have like 10,000 people that can all mobilize towards that, maybe they get it done in a few years. So that's a huge form of leverage that's existed for as long as people have been around. The second form is capital, as I mentioned, and you see this today with private equity firms, hedge funds, capital allocators, anyone who manages a massive pool of funds. They The reason why the model works and the reason why there are people who just invest money for others is because it's also a very effective way to increase your productivity or the return that you're going to get through leverage. So that has always existed, and obviously, someone with a lot of capital is able to do a lot of things. They could also hire people, so that taps into that people side of things. But then the newer two forms of leverage are code and media. So software, one person can run a software company that reaches thousands, hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of people. And then with media, you and I can sit down and record a 30-minute episode and it can be watched hundreds of thousands of times. So I think about that all the time because when it comes to my own work ethic and when I am working, I'm also thinking about how can I tap into any of these forms of leverage to increase my productivity. Whether it's, with people, it could be like, okay, I have a couple of VAs, virtual assistants that work for me. And if there's a low leverage task that I need to get done, maybe it's outsourcing it to them so that they can work on that while I work on something else. And then collectively our output is doubled. Or if there's some sort of, taking a look at code, maybe there's an AI tool or a software tool that I can use that can increase my content creation output. Maybe it can speed up the ideation process because I'm not just sitting by myself with a piece of paper. I can talk back and forth with Claude or Gemini. Hey, is this a good idea? Okay, give me like 10 other ideas that are similar to it. I think that is hardworking work ethic. The lazy work ethic would have been me just being like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to try my best and think of 10 ideas if I can on a piece of paper without leveraging any of the available tools that are around me. Like that to me is a little bit lazy. And then afterwards, I'm going to tell myself, oh, yeah, I worked 80 hours a week.
I love how you called the 8-hour work week lazy because it really is. Because if you were just going at something with no plan and not really learning, you might as well just not do it if you're not learning. One of the things that I've learned recently, Matt, from my job and that I love and even just do with myself when I work, and I know you do as well, is in my job, we do beginning a day and end a day meetings. And that makes sure that we're not going down too many rabbit holes. We're all aligned. And some people say, oh, yeah, it's a waste of time, too many meetings. But when you're working with a team attacking a goal and trying to solve a problem, it's really important to make sure you're aligned on what you're solving and where you're spending the most time, because you don't want someone to spend 80 hours a week on something that was not important in the end. You want to stop that 5 hours in, if possible. And the same thing applies to your work ethic. If you spend 5 hours editing a podcast, like I have before, I should cut myself in early, which I've started to do more, and say, look, this is not working. I need to try a different approach to editing this episode. And then I'll ask some of our other friends that have podcasts, or I'll text you, Matt, and we'll see how we can solve this problem better together. So I think having that personal end of day, beginning of day meeting with yourself cadence is also something that can be incredibly helpful to make sure you're making the most of your work ethic. Because I think part of the work ethic is actually doing the work, like actually editing the podcast. But the other part, which is much harder for all of us, including you and I, and I'm sure the audience as well, is that higher level meta angle of work ethic saying, am I using my mental energy where it should be used? And that's the hardest part about work ethic that I don't think enough people think about. We could go on and on about this forever, Matt, and how these three categories apply to everyone and everything from Mr. Beast to Home Depot. Everything starts at zero. Every founder and every executive has faced these mental, from both themselves and external factors of trying to get over building something great, and also the work ethic of getting there. And this episode's gone on far longer than I think both of us initially planned, just because we're so passionate about it and the examples that we've seen in our real life. And Matt, do you want to take us home and close out this episode?
Everyone knows that they should work hard. There's no debating it. We don't need to sit here and tell you that work ethic is important. But very few people actually stick to a goal and put in the work at the level of intensity and for the length of time that is required to see real results that you can be proud of. And so if you didn't take anything else from this video, our hope is that you at least change the way that you think about work ethic, because it's not just about the number of hours that you worked. It's also about how hard you worked and how smart you worked as well. And the people that can really do this at a high level over a very long period of time are the ones that one day other people are going to look at them and think to themselves, wow, how did they get there? It must have been luck. Thanks for watching.